Okay, once again, tell me your name and affiliation, please.
Jamie Webster with PFC Energy.
Great. Tell me when you started commuting in and why.
I started commuting in probably 4 or 5 years ago, and in 2007. And the reason I did it was a combination of factors. One, I live out in Reston, and I work down in Washington D.C., so it's a bit of a commute, whatever way I'm going to do it. And with the gasoline prices continuing to rise, and my expectations that they would stay high even when you have periods when they're low, and just being a regular biker, I checked it out one weekend and saw that it was, doable, and so I've pretty much been doing it, 6 to 8 months every year since then.
So gas prices, do you think they're generally going to stay high? What's the main reason or two? That's the case.
They've been coming down the last couple of weeks, but in general, you're not going to go back to those periods of those great times when it was, around $2 a gallon. And if you do, it's a short-term sort of impact. And the reason is because you've got more and more supply needs to be brought online every year to handle global demand, and gasoline prices are set on the global market. And so as you need more and more of that demand brought online, more and more supply is brought online, and those supplies increasingly are more expensive to bring online. So this isn't back in just where you just need Saudi Arabian crude, which costs $3 or $4 a barrel to get out of the ground. You need all of those sorts of crude, some of which are actually quite expensive to get out. And so over time, as it continues to rise, you've got that underlying fundamental reason for why gasoline and why crude prices are likely going to keep going up, assuming, of course, that everybody on a global basis, that we continue to have an increase in demand.
So what have you seen on the path here? Have you seen a connection, a correlation between gas prices go up, more traffic on the bike trail?
Definitely. This is, as an energy analyst, I pay attention to a whole host of kind of real indicators. But this is kind of my my ad hoc anecdotal indicator. And we're actually standing at the intersection where I always pay attention every day when I come down to see how many people are stacked up at the light, how many bikers are waiting to be able to cross. And I've been here on when it's particularly nice days, and certainly earlier this year when the prices were really high, you'd have 20 to 25 bikes lined up trying to make this light. I'm waiting for the time when I'm actually going to have to wait for the light to cycle twice before I can get through.
So if and when gas prices go down, and they're down a little bit now, are you personally going to think about getting on the road, back in your car, or no?
No, I won't. I'll probably I'll just keep kind of doing what I'm doing, and partly it's there are other costs associated with riding by bike. I mean, riding by your car. So you got to pay for parking in Washington D.C. But the other thing is, once you've kind of figured out an alternative, and generally we're talking about a sustainable sort of alternative that you can keep on doing, you'll generally stick with that once you've done it. Now there are other sorts of behaviors that maybe I won't do, so I won't focus quite so much on trying to consolidate shopping trips or errands on the weekend. But this sort of behavior, now that I've kind of figured out how to do it, it moves from just a behavior modification to a habit. And that's what you see a lot of Americans doing. Once they kind of have figured out how to use public transportation, or they've moved their home closer to their job, or they bought that smaller car, they don't suddenly change just because you've got a short dip in the gasoline price. In order to kind of go back to that, you would really need a sustained, long-term, much lower gasoline price, similar to what we saw maybe in the late 90s when the SUVs were really booming. But I don't really see that happening anytime in the future with all of the demand growth that you're seeing out of the developing world.
And finally, when you talk about this notion of demand destruction, high prices kill demand, perhaps for good, what's the best indicator or yardstick of that, data-wise?
So we pay attention to what the price at the pump is, which comes out, EIA, the statistical arm of DOE puts that out every week, and there's other places you can look for it as well. Generally, here in Washington, D.C., politicians get all concerned and start to get in front of gasoline stations talking about the high price once it hits $4 or once it's close to hitting $4. As with many things, the U.S. population is generally ahead of the politicians and generally start to notice it at $3.50. And once it hits that point, generally consumers start to change their behavior and start to bring down that demand. So it's really, politically it's $4, but $3.50 is actually when people start to make changes to their behavior. And you'll have some of those changes will be a temporary sort of thing, but then other ones are very much permanent sorts of changes. Once you get a smaller car, you're in a smaller car.
Yeah. Okay, thanks much.
No problem.
Great.